January 14th, 1942. The Oval Office. Washington is sealed tight against winter, but the room feels colder than the streets outside. President Franklin Roosevelt sits behind his desk, cigarette holder tilted upward, eyes fixed not on a map, but on a man. Winston Churchill stands opposite him, coat still on, hat in hand, the fatigue of the Atlantic crossing etched into his face. Pearl Harbor is barely 5 weeks past. American ships still burn in the Pacific. The public wants vengeance, quickly and visibly. Yet this meeting is not about anger. It is about sequence. The decision before them is simple only in words: where to strike first. Japan, which has bloodied the United States and humiliated its fleet? Or Germany, which has not fired a shot at American soil, but dominates Europe, strangles Britain, and threatens to decide the war before America can fully enter it? The choice will determine not just where men die first, but how many will die later. Churchill speaks with urgency, almost with desperation. Britain is bleeding slowly. The U-boats are winning their quiet war. The Soviet Union reels under the weight of Barbarossa. If Germany is not checked soon, there may be no Europe left to liberate. He argues not for British pride, but for survival. Europe first, he insists. It is the only rational course. Roosevelt listens. He does not interrupt. He knows what Churchill cannot say aloud. America is not Britain. Congress is not Parliament. The voters who sent Roosevelt back to the White House did not do so to fight in France. They did so to recover from depression, to avoid foreign entanglements, to protect their sons. Pearl Harbor changed everything, but not all at once. Rage is real, so is impatience. Outside the White House, newspapers already frame the war as a Pacific reckoning. Inside, Roosevelt understands that wars are not won by emotion, but they are lost by ignoring it. He understands something else as well. If America fights Germany first, it will do so largely for others. If it fights Japan first, it will do so for itself. This is the moment, not a battle, a choice, one that will decide how this coalition holds together or whether it fractures under the weight of its own necessities. Roosevelt and Churchill represent more than two nations in that room. They embody two ways of understanding war. Churchill is a man shaped by Europe's long memory of catastrophe. He has seen empires fall and borders erased. For him, Germany is not merely an enemy state, but a recurring condition, one that must be confronted early or endured endlessly. Delay is dangerous. Hesitation is defeat in slow motion.
Roosevelt's experience is different. He governs a continental republic insulated by oceans, a nation whose strength lies not only in industry, but in patience. He thinks in systems and sequences. He knows that America will eventually outproduce every enemy it faces. The question is not whether the United States can fight everywhere, but when it should begin, and in what order. He measures time not in weeks, but in election cycles, shipping tonnage, training pipelines, and public consent. Churchill presses his case with the practiced eloquence of a man who has argued Britain's survival for 3 years. He speaks of combined bomber offensives, of reopening a Western front, of striking at the soft underbelly of Europe. His language is vivid, his conviction absolute. Britain cannot hold out indefinitely. Russia may collapse. If Germany wins in Europe, Japan becomes secondary by default. Roosevelt does not argue point by point. He shifts the frame. He speaks of American mothers and fathers who watched the newsreels from Hawaii. He speaks of a Navy wounded in full view of the nation. He reminds Churchill that the American public understands Japan as an enemy instinctively, viscerally. Germany remains abstract, a map problem, a future threat. Roosevelt knows that democratic wars require emotional legitimacy before they can sustain strategic patience. This is the human collision at the center of the alliance, not ego against ego, but pressure against pressure. Churchill carries the fear of extinction. Roosevelt carries the responsibility of mobilizing a society that has never fought a total war overseas. Each believes the other underestimates the stakes. Each believes himself to be the realist in the room. What makes the moment fragile is that neither man is wrong. Germany is the greater long-term danger. Japan is the immediate wound. To choose one is to risk the other. To delay either is to gamble with lives not yet committed. Roosevelt knows that if he openly rejects Europe first, Britain may despair. If he embraces it too loudly, he may lose Congress before the war has truly begun. He also understands that coalitions are not held together by declarations alone. They are held together by trust in sequence, by promises that feel survivable. Churchill waits for reassurance. Roosevelt offers none yet. He allows the silence to do the work. In that silence lies the accumulated weight of failures not yet made, of operations not yet attempted, of egos not yet bruised. The war has barely begun for America. For Britain, it feels as though it has been going on forever.
The tension in the room is not born in January. It is inherited. Churchill arrives carrying the weight of 1940, of Dunkirk and the Blitz, of nights when Britain stood alone and every decision felt terminal. He remembers American neutrality not as a policy, but as an absence. Roosevelt remembers those same years as a balancing act, pushing aid through Congress inch by inch while isolationists counted votes and newspapers warned of another generation lost overseas. Each man has already compromised more than history will ever fully record. Churchill's urgency is sharpened by memory. He recalls the failure of delayed action after the First World War, the cost of believing that time would tame Germany. He has watched allies fall by inches because they waited for perfect conditions. To him, postponement is not prudence, it is repetition. He fears that America, new to global war, will learn old lessons the hard way. Roosevelt's caution is sharpened by a different memory. He recalls the political scars left by Wilson's war, the broken promises of a world made safe, the backlash that followed victory. He knows that if this war is framed incorrectly, the peace will collapse before it is signed. America must not simply fight, it must endure the fight long enough to shape the world afterward. Around them, advisors wait. George Marshall's quiet calculations hover in the background, divisions not yet trained, shipping not yet built, staff plans still inked in pencil. The Atlantic is not a corridor, it is an obstacle. Every soldier sent to Europe in 1942 is a soldier not ready, not equipped, not supported. Britain asks for speed. Roosevelt sees risk. Churchill invokes necessity. The Germans are strong now, he says. Their grip must be tested before it hardens. Roosevelt counters with capacity. The Americans are not ready yet, he implies, and wars begun in haste are often paid for in blood. He does not say it aloud, but he knows that an early failure in Europe could fracture the alliance beyond repair. This is where grievances accumulate. Britain hears hesitation as reluctance. America hears urgency as pressure. Both sides recall past disappointments. Both sides fear being dragged into decisions that will outlast the men who make them. The room does not fill with raised voices, but with unresolved history. What neither man can escape is the arithmetic of time. Germany grows stronger with each conquered factory. Japan grows bolder with each unopposed month. Resources are finite. Attention is finite. Political capital most of all. The war will demand everything. The question is in what order. The conversation circles back to the same fault line. Europe first in principle, Pacific first in emotion. Churchill wants commitment. Roosevelt wants flexibility. And somewhere between them lies the breaking point, where compromise ceases to reassure and begins to obscure responsibility. The breaking point arrives quietly, not with raised voices, but with a sentence that settles the matter by refusing to dramatize it. Roosevelt leans back, the cigarette holder tracing a slow arc in the air, and says that America will agree to Germany as the primary enemy, but it will not ignore the Pacific to prove it. The words are careful, almost bureaucratic, yet Churchill understands their weight immediately. This is not the unequivocal pledge he wants. It is not the declaration Britain needs to feel safe. It is a framework. Germany first in strategy. Japan was first enough in action to satisfy an angry public and a wounded navy. A war fought on two clocks, neither fully subordinated to the other. Churchill pauses. He has learned over decades in politics to recognize when insistence will harden rather than persuade. He knows that pushing further risks something worse than delay. It risks resentment, and resentment inside a coalition is corrosive. He recalls how easily alliances fracture when pride overtakes necessity. He thinks of France. He thinks of 1918. There is a moment where he considers pressing harder, invoking Britain's sacrifices, its isolation, its endurance. He chooses not to. The silence stretches. Advisors watch the two men study one another, each measuring not policy, but character. Roosevelt's expression does not change. He is not unmoved, he is resolved. The compromise is formalized soon after. Germany first becomes a doctrine, but doctrine is not destiny. In practice, American carriers stream west, Marines train for islands whose names few Americans can pronounce. Europe will wait, not because it is less important, but because the United States cannot yet afford to fail there. Churchill accepts the outcome with visible restraint. In his memoirs, he will later describe the agreement as essential but incomplete. He understands that Roosevelt has made a political decision, not a tactical one. He may not like it, but he recognizes its necessity. Better an America fully committed later than half committed now.
For Roosevelt, the risk is personal as much as strategic. He will be accused of hesitation, of splitting focus, of prolonging Britain's suffering. He will also be blamed for every American death that follows, regardless of theater. He knows this. He accepts it. Leadership, in his view, is not about choosing the cleanest option. It is about choosing the one that a democracy can survive. When the meeting ends, there is no sense of victory, no relief, only alignment, provisional and fragile. The alliance holds, but just barely. Each side leaves with doubts unresolved. Each side trusts the other just enough to continue. Outside, Washington moves on. Inside the war rooms, planners begin to translate ambiguity into orders. Men will soon die as a result of this compromise, though none of them will ever know the room where it was made. This is the moment where compromise stops being reassuring and starts being consequential, where responsibility settles on one man's shoulders not because he demanded it, but because no one else could carry it. The consequences unfold unevenly, as compromises always do. In Britain, relief mixes with unease. Germany first exists on paper, but London watches American forces pour into the Pacific and wonders how long paper will hold against steel and fire. In Moscow, Stalin reads the signals more coldly. He hears promises of a second front and counts the months without one. Every delay is paid for in Soviet blood, and he will not forget it. In the United States, Roosevelt absorbed criticism from both sides. Some accuse him of risking Europe by indulging public anger. Others argue he is entangling America too deeply, too soon, in a war that still feels distant. He answers neither group directly. He allows events to speak. Midway, Guadalcanal, and the slow rebuilding of confidence at sea. Each victory buys him time to train divisions, time to build ships, time to prepare the country for a war that will eventually come home in the form of casualty lists from places far from the Pacific.
Churchill watches and waits. He pushes where he can.
North Africa becomes the proving ground, a compromise within a compromise. Not France, not yet, but not nothing. It is enough to keep the alliance moving, enough to keep hope alive without forcing a premature reckoning. Pride is swallowed, necessity is not. The soldiers, meanwhile, have no access to these calculations. They fight where they are sent. Marines die on coral beaches under a sun that offers no shelter. British and Commonwealth troops bled in the desert. Soviet armies grind forward at costs that defy comprehension. The arguments of generals and presidents echo faintly, if at all, in their world. History will later argue over whether Roosevelt delayed too long, or whether he saved the alliance by pacing it. The numbers invite debate, so do the maps. What is harder to quantify is the burden of choosing a war's order of pain, of deciding which front waits and which pays first. In the end, Germany will fall under an avalanche of men and material that could not have been conjured in 1942. Japan will be defeated by a war of distance and attrition that only a maritime power could sustain. The sequence will shape the peace as surely as the battles shape the victory. Europe was rebuilt under American presence, Asia transformed under American power. Roosevelt does not live to see the final accounting. Churchill will, briefly, and will find that memory is less generous than necessity. Yet the decision made in that winter room remains a lesson written in restraint, that coalition warfare is not about perfect alignment, but about survivable disagreement, that moral courage is sometimes the refusal to satisfy anyone completely. If there is value in revisiting this moment, it is not to crown one man right and the other wrong, but to recognize how leadership functions when every option carries blood, when the hardest decisions are not how to fight, but when and for whom. You're invited to reflect on that distinction and on how we remember those who made choices none of us would want to inherit.